Welcome to Pursuing Justice. I am Harriet Hendel. For the next two podcasts, we will be talking about another case of wrongful conviction, a case where the Innocence Project of Florida became involved, and in January of 2019, Dean McKee, who had spent 30 years behind bars, was a free man. On our last two podcasts, we met Seth Miller, the executive director of the Innocence Project of Florida. He laid the groundwork for this case in legal terms, and today we are very, very pleased and honored to have Dean McKee with us to talk about life beyond prison. We also have his fiancée, Dani Cutler, to share her unique perspective. Welcome to you both.
Well, thank you for having us.
Well, you are so welcome. So let's do a quick recap for our listeners. I would encourage our listeners to go back and listen to both podcasts that Seth Miller has done to give you some groundwork and some an overview of Dean's case. So let's do that quickly. In June of 1988, you were sentenced to life in prison. You were then 17 years old. Your sentence carried a minimum mandatory sentence of 25 years. In January of 2011, I think that's the right date, the Innocence Project of Florida stepped in, and in January of 2018, you were released on bond after nearly 30 years, after being convicted of a crime for which you were innocent. At the age of 46, your life on the outside began. I am certain our listeners want to know what it took to survive decades in prison. How sure were you, Dean, that one day you would be free? What would you say to that?
Well, some days you didn't think you were going to make it, because basically every day you're told that you're going to die there. And but you got to keep moving. You got to keep, use your mind and try to find, the little things that matter. Like, I have a little bag of peanuts and sit outside and feed little squirrels. Right?
When you say the little things that maybe helped you survive, what other things, like what you just illustrated, what other things helped you make it through each day?
Well, actually reading.
All right.
Reading really broadened my mind. I read classics. I've read psychology. I've read, history books and what other men have gone through. Papillon was a very powerful book. I know they got a movie, which I watched with Dani.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in that very negative environment that's like reinforced systematically through the system, it's not just Florida, but every penal system that they have, it's reinforced to try to beat you down and break you. In ways you got to be stubborn, but you have to find ways in your life, like art for me. Even though they would rip up my art books or break my pencils or take my pencil sharpener that I bought for a couple ramen soups from somebody, you got to persevere. You got to dig deep. A lot of people don't make it. A lot of people were sentenced to like 5 years and they couldn't handle it. And they'll sharpen a spoon and cut their wrist open.
Yeah.
You see a lot of brutality, but you find ways to stay in touch with your humanity.
Yeah. Well, that's a beautiful way to put it, to stay in touch with your humanity. Now, in terms of reading, What sparked your interest in digging into books?
Well, my uncle actually, before I went to prison, he he gave me a book for Christmas, which I didn't like. I got a stinking book for Christmas,
Hmm.
but it was Treasure Island, and I got in trouble somehow, so I never read it until I got confined to my bedroom. But I read that book, and I read that book, and the imagery and the imaginative story and all that made me really like reading books. So,
Hmm.
uh, I read Thucydides, Herodotus, the Iliad is one of my favorite books.
Now,
I like.
where? Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, Danny would send me books. My
Uh-huh.
cousin would send me books. I would go to the law library where they have the legal section, and then they have novels and stuff like that. Um, I stayed trying to read as much as I could,
Hmm.
but it
What?
also shows you different people at different times. Um, Instead of being, I know this probably come up, but being ignorant and being an ignorant little kid saying some really stupid stuff, uh, kind of like parroting the older kids that I was hanging around and my brother, but living around people in very extreme environments and nourishing my mind. I've read stuff of Martin Luther King, and
Mhm.
you hear the speech, but you really don't think about actually what he was saying. Um, about character is the sole
Mhm.
factor of how you would like look at somebody, not judge somebody, but um, I've met some wonderful people. But prison has a way of, it's so extreme, one level to the next, of it either brings out the goodness in you or it brings out the worst in people.
Mhm.
And you see that by the people that you live around. You eat with people for years. You see the emotions. Their mom died. You get shook down on Christmas, and you're on lockdown because they don't. You know, they're just trying to harass people. And but you see how people deal with certain situations, and their character comes out, not just for a couple days, or like people here on the streets. Um, you might not interact with people, but only 30 seconds at the store, and you can't really judge them in the sense of get a feel for who they are as a person. So when people are compressed in a very negative space for
Mhm.
decades, you really see the true character of other people. Um,
It's very true.
and one
Very true.
person, a black juvenile, his name's Antonio Dossi. He was my neighbor, my bunkie, for
Mhm.
years and years.
Hmm.
And tomorrow we're going to drive to Tallahassee from Largo, and I'm going to speak up for him to see if he can get parole.
Oh, he's still in prison.
Yeah,
Oh, I
and
see. Hmm.
so we're going to pick his mom up, which is a beautiful lady, and take her up there and see what we can do.
That's
And
terrific.
uh,
That's wonderful. Uh, you've really given us a small window, and indeed it is small because I think no one can ever know what it's like to be in prison unless you have experienced it for yourself. But you certainly can give us your own perspective. It's fascinating to me that books saved you in a sense and really became an escape, I would think, right?
right,
To read. I think I've sent 200 books to people that I'm in touch with who are in prison, and I know what books mean to them. And often it's the only thing I can send because some prisons won't even accept packages anymore. But
right.
books are great gifts, absolutely great gifts. So that's a really great window into what it was that helped you survive all the time that you were there. What would you say is the greatest difference between your life today and your life inside?
Um, I would say maybe I'm not exactly sure what you're trying to ask, but I get to act like a human being.
Okay, that's
Um, I'm free. I don't take it for granted.
right,
And
right.
but
And I would think your ability to make your own choices, to do what you want to do, and not be told what you have to do, the tight scheduling in prison,
right,
the counts, the lockdowns, all of that,
right.
that is so restrictive. So that's in essence, I guess, what I was asking. What are you doing right now that gives you a sense of purpose?
Oh well, the tattoo shop, of course. That was a dream born out in there and conceived, and I had a hope against hope, I guess, with the court system and the parole system, of course, too. But that kept me balanced in a sense that I could have this if I only get the chance. And I was given the chance, and it's here. I have the key to open my own tattoo shop when I go to work now. I have a garden. I have this beautiful lady with me. We've planted trees, peach trees, lemon trees, myrtles, built a pond. I chose to do that.
That's
And if
great.
I open the refrigerator and I want some orange juice instead of milk, because they took milk from us too. So that was the first thing um, that I bought. Well, I had a little money from the commissary, so I
Yeah.
bought a gallon of milk. And but the I do think that most people that have never experienced incarceration, whether they were wrongfully convicted or they actually did it, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
People out here that are never exposed to the legal system, I think they always believe that their freedom is always going to be intact. You're going to have
Hmm.
people that do the right thing when nobody's looking. They're not trying to look good politically, or you know, it can be taken from you. It could be taken from Danny,
That's
some of your
right.
colleagues. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how young you are. If you're white or black, and the system, it's it could disappear in a blink of an eye, and you hear that sound when that cell door slams, and you will never ever forget that
No,
sound.
sure not. Yeah, very true. I wanted you to go back because you sounded so excited about your tattoo shop. And I want you to tell us, how did you learn about tattoos, and how come you decided to open your own shop?
Well, in prison, you're not allowed to tattoo. It's a you can get a DR for it. It's a disciplinary report and go to confinement.
Right.
Uh, so the way I was drawing and sketching and pursuing my studies in art and like focusing my mind on books I could get or go to the library and look at Rembrandt, Rubens, and people like that, Da Vinci. And the tattoo guy actually called me up to his cell one night after he seen a bunch of my artwork and said, "We're going to teach you how to tattoo." So I took care of myself, hygiene, coffee, stuff, soups, through tattooing, which is basically illegal in prison. And so that's what I did for a very long time. And I was very good at it. And I always wanted to open my own tattoo shop and freely express myself, because in there you have basically no purpose. So I've tattooed people's